Today's video is inspired by a conversation I had with my mom pretty recently about the undervalue of labor in America, particularly in the textile and clothing industry. So I was talking with my mom more generally about how she was very frustrated that she felt like a lot of things that she'd buy in the store are not made to last very long. And she's not wrong. But the reason that happens is because she and a lot of other people, myself to some extent included, want goods for very cheap. Now, you kind of can't have a good that's made very well and very cheaply. And the more we started talking about it, the more she realized just how many industries were affected by this and to what extent. I asked her, I said, what do you think is a fair wage for me to make making clothing for people? And she said somewhere in the ballpark between $10 and $15. I don't remember the last amount. I'd like to state I do think that's a bit of a lowball estimate. I think that people who are sewing clothing for a living deserve to make a little bit more money than that just because it is skilled work. But that's what she estimated, so that's what we went with. And I said, okay, so how long do you think it takes to make, a basic, I think we used the example of a skirt because we used a skirt I was wearing at the time. And she said, I think she said like an hour or something. And I corrected her and said that the one I was wearing took me about 2 hours, but we'll say for the sake of argument it took the person an hour. So that's a minimum of, we'll estimate low and say $10 right there, combined with the, cost of buying the fabric for that skirt. I then said to her, what would you actually be willing to pay for that skirt? And she said, I believe, $10. So even by her own estimate, she either wanted to underpay the tailor or not pay at all for materials, neither of which are realistic to creating a sustainable industry. What a fair price for a lot of clothing would be. And when I started giving her price estimates, she said she didn't think that was a realistic price for people to pay for a lot of clothing items. And in her case specifically, I can see where she's coming from because she probably buys at least one article of clothing per month. And when you buy at least one per month, you don't really want to pay, $40, $50 for one item. Which brings us to the larger problem of just the way she shops for clothing in general. She shops for it with the knowledge it's disposable. Even if she's not thinking of it that way in that moment, she knows it's cheap, it's easy to go get more if you decide you're not content with the items you just bought. She goes to TJ Maxx and Marshalls pretty much once a month, and I did as well for a very long time. That's not even to get into the additional factor of, say you start a new job in a week. After this quarantine's over, say you have to start with a new company, or your company changes its dress code. Say that now every day you need to wear a green shirt. I don't know about you, but if I go and look in my closet, I maybe only have one green shirt. That means in one sitting I need to go and buy at least 5 so that I have one for each day of the week. Probably more than that if I want to have a couple extras. So, if I need to do something like that, I also can't really afford to spend, $40, $50 on each individual top. I kind of need them in bulk, cheap, and easy. Even I, as somebody who is doing my best to try and be conscious about, buying clothing at an ethical price and doing my best to value labor, could end up in a situation where it's just a thing I have to get over and do. Of course, you could always go to a thrift shop, but with a thrift shop, you are limited to what is there at any given time. If you need, like I said, the example of 7 green shirts, you may go there and be able to find a few, but they might not have enough in your size, in a cut that's acceptable for what you need for work, in the exact color you need. Whereas if you look out at the larger retail landscape, you can probably find enough of what you need there. That's not to say you shouldn't try thrift stores and secondhand stores first. It's just, sometimes that option still doesn't always work. So what's the solution here? I mean, that's what everybody wants to know. That's what my mom kept asking me, at least. And the answer is really, you can change your spending habits, but at the same time, that's also almost not enough. You see, as much as we've been talking about the clothing and textile industry, it's not as though the undervaluing of labor stops there. It is an easy and stark example to see, especially as people who know how to sew, how undervalued that labor is. But look at a lot of the things you buy. Is that toaster that you bought at Walmart or the dollar store the other day really only worth $5? Is that really the price we want a toaster to be? You know, is that coffee maker really only worth $15? Is that all the labor and parts that went into that is really worth? I know some of these things are assembled in large part by machine, but even things assembled by machine have parts of it that have to be done by people. What are those people getting paid? Are they making a fair wage for what they're doing? Odds are probably not. Especially when you keep in mind that a lot of this labor is happening overseas in places that don't have good protections in place for workers. You know, we could apply this to industries across the board, but if we get into exactly what I think every industry deserves as a fair wage, we're going to get a little controversial here. But the short version of it is that I think most workers in the US are also underpaid. And when you're underpaid and you've got to put food on the table and you've got kids, you know, shopping ethically, shopping in a way that's going to actually try and do something about this problem isn't necessarily an option. So, as for a solution, I don't really think this is a thing we can completely fix with our individual consumer habits. We have to push for companies to want to value their labor. And that's where it gets hard. And that's why I think being politically active is so important. I'm going to try not to turn this into a news and politics channel, but in addition to sewing, my other passion is news and politics. And it probably will creep in occasionally, like this video here. This is just a little dipping the toe in the water. I'll keep it related to sewing, but, you know, sewing and garment making is in a lot of ways very ingrained with a lot of different political issues. We're very involved with a lot of the problems. So that's all for today. I hope y'all found this interesting. It gave you some food for thought. I know many other people have already made videos on this topic, probably better and more well-researched than mine. This is sort of just me rambling after a weird conversation with my mom. So that's all for this week.